How my life changed and became meaningful. Chapter 2. Valencia Community College, VCC, Part 1. Three sisters, ages 92, 94, and 96, live together in a three-story building. One night, the 96-year-old wants to take a bath. She puts one foot in the bathtub and pauses. Then she yells down the stairs and says, I don't remember if I was getting in or getting out of the bathtub. The 94-year-old yells, I don't know. I'll come up and see. She gets halfway up the stairs and pauses. Then she says, I don't remember if I was going up or down. The 92-year-old shakes her head and says, I sure hope I'll never get that forgetful when I am your age. She knocks on wood for good luck, and then she says, Hold on, I'll come up and help both of you as soon as I see who is at the door. The very first day my dad and I arrived in Orlando, Julio took us to Valencia Community College. This was an educational institution just at about a 10-minute drive from his house. In the United States, there are 3,700 universities, including community colleges. The main difference between these two institutions is that community colleges are a type of educational organization where classes are smaller and the credits for the courses are cheaper. Another aspect to consider is that you can only study approximately the equivalent of what we call an FP de grado superior in Spain, an associate's degree as they call it in North America, or half of what we call in Spain a licenciatura, which is a bachelor's degree. If you want to go on with your studies and finish your bachelor's degree, or even get a master's degree or a doctorate degree, PhD, you have to study at a university, for community colleges do not offer these study programs. Moreover, another important and quite important distinction between the universities in Spain and the ones in the States is that while in Spain they close for the summer months in July, August, and part of September, in the US both the colleges and universities remain open all year round. In my personal opinion, this is an excellent advantage as well as a good opportunity, for you can finish your degree in a shorter period of time if you decide to study the entire year. For instance, in order to get a bachelor's degree, if you study hard, you can finish it in about 4 years or even less. In terms of the 12-month year, it is divided in what they call semesters, which are not necessarily 6 months, as the name might initially and erroneously imply. Rather, the university periods consist of 4 semesters of 3 months each, dividing thus the year in 4 parts. In general, a student takes 4 classes per semester, and each class usually consists of 3 credits, since everything there is based according to that measure, at least educationally speaking. At the beginning of each semester, the college publishes a newspaper with all sorts of information about every single different class taught there. Included there are timetables, professors available, and credits awarded in each subject. Each student then, according to their schedule and availability, can go to the college in the morning, afternoon, or evening. He or she also has the possibility to choose from quite a wide variety of options, a specific subject, and with the instructor of their choice. Attendance to class is mainly compulsory, and most of the subjects have 3 credits, although there are a few ones with 4 and even others with 5. This depends on whether a specific subject has a laboratory practice or some extra work outside the classroom. Such was the case, for example, of the subject physics, in which we, and I emphasize we, because I also had to take the subject, had to spend at least 2 hours a week in the lab doing different activities and experiments, putting into practice the theory learned in the classroom. However, I insist once again, 90% of the subjects have 3 credits, making it a total of 12 credits per semester if you take 4 subjects. And this is the most normal and logical thing to do for most of the students in community colleges and universities. To cite another example, Calculus 1, 2, and 3 were subjects that had 4 credits each due to their difficulty and material taught in each one. By the way, I remember the Calculus 1 professor being a very old woman who smoked every chance she had outside the classroom. On a certain occasion, I took a very complicated exam of this subject right after having lunch, and I had to learn the hard way the importance of waiting at least 2 hours after eating a succulent meal before forcing the brain to complicated mathematical computations. At the end of the approximately 4 year intensive study period, a student who is getting a bachelor's degree could end up with a total of about 150 credits, depending on the number of credits per subject and the number of semesters enrolled. This number of credits is more than enough to graduate because most bachelor's degrees require between 120 and 150 credits. Nevertheless, though, we must consider the fact that this requirement also depends on the appropriate subjects needed to complete a degree and not only on credits. In other words, you can't just take class after class and add credit after credit, since while some of the subjects are optional, most of the remaining ones are compulsory for a specific and particular degree and, consequently, must be taken in order to graduate. So, in the end, you need to complete the entire program for the specific degree, whether you have extra credits or not. Back in 1986, Valencia Community College was divided in 3 campuses, although nowadays there are more, and it still keeps growing and expanding. The one I attended to was the West Campus, which was located, as its name implies, in the west part of the city. This campus was very close to several theme parks, such as Universal Studios, SeaWorld, and, a little farther, the most famous parks of Walt Disney World. Therefore, I was, in my opinion, living in the best part of the city and studying in the finest and biggest campus of the entire college by then. Valencia's West Campus had 6 different buildings of just 2 floors each, and one of them was located to a beautiful lake. In fact, as you were in the cafeteria of this building, the views were quite pleasant and relaxing just by looking at the lake and enjoying a moment of peace and quietness. One always had a feeling of great openness and cleanness walking around the different buildings to go from one classroom to another, since everything was at all times extremely clean, tidy, and organized, in spite of the college having a huge number of students. I'd rather not venture to say a figure in terms of the total number of alumni the college might have had at that time. But I can certainly say that there were all types of different programs offered, and classes taught mornings, afternoons, and evenings from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. Furthermore, each building had a specific purpose and was mostly dedicated to a different area of study. Just to give an example, building number 6 held the library, whereas the gym was on building number 1. This last one was obviously used for sporting events such as basketball games, as well as for the graduations that took place twice a year, more precisely in the months of December and April, at the end of the winter and the spring semesters, respectively. Smoking inside the buildings was rigorously forbidden in 1986. As a matter of fact, the elevators that each edifice had, mainly used by students on wheelchairs or with other disabilities, had a big plaque that read, "Smoking fine $5,000 or 1 night in prison." I couldn't believe my eyes the first time I saw it, but there it was. Americans were really strict with the use of tobacco in school and in other public places. This, nonetheless, was just great for me, since I hated, and I still do, the bad habit of smoking. Although I'd tasted it briefly to see what it was like when I was very young back in high school in Spain, I've never smoked in my whole life, and I have always considered it to be one of the worst addictions in our society. And sadly, it is also the first cause of disease and deaths in the world nowadays. And yet, so many people continue smoking, sometimes up to a pack or even more per day. As far as I'm concerned, it is just preposterous. Every building also had an open space in the middle of the first floor with armchairs and tables so the students could sit down to study, to talk, or simply to relax. In terms of the classrooms, they were generally small, with a capacity for about no more than 30 students. There were others, though, which were bigger and used for classes which included mandatory subjects for all the students to take, independently of their major field of study. A few minutes after our arrival at the college, I met the supervisor of the intensive English course for non-native students. I was surprised and glad at the same time when I found out that this woman spoke Spanish because my English language skills were not very good at that time. After all, that was the main purpose of my trip. That is, to learn as much English as possible and then go back to Spain and continue with my teaching degree. To be quite honest, my knowledge of the English language was so limited that when I tried to watch the movie they played on the airplane on my way from Miami to Madrid, where we later connected with another flight to fly to Orlando, I didn't understand anything at all. The title of the movie was A Chorus Line, and regrettably, I didn't even know what the word high meant when I heard it mentioned several times in the film. Such was my pitiful English level back then. The supervisor of the course was a very well educated, friendly, and kind 45-year-old woman. On top of that, since she had studied some Spanish in the past, she was able to communicate reasonably well with us in our native language. That was quite helpful indeed. After chatting with us for a few minutes, we all went to the English lab where the professor of the intensive course was teaching 3 other students. I remember that when I was introduced to her, the first thing she told me was that she didn't speak a single word in Spanish. Her name was Marilyn Santos. Well, with such last name, she should come from a Latin background, I immediately thought. But the fact was that she was using her husband's last name, as most women in the United States do. While on this topic, I'd like to add that this is a very common practice there, as well as using only one last name, ignoring and obviating the second one completely. For better or for worse, when women marry in North America, they somehow lose their identity up to a certain point. That's something I never fully understood nor liked, and I prefer the way we do it in Spain, where a woman keeps her surname all her life, whether she gets married or not. To be continued.